You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
Oh, hey. Sorry, I didn't expect to see you. Sorry if I seem a little tense right now. I'm fending off a dangerous ghost. No, not him. He's a friendly ghost from Boo's mansion. No, I'm talking about a truly evil spirit, and I know it's out to get me. Now's usually the time when it shows up. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about the Twilight Zone. It's a series that's filled with ghosts of various types and professions, and But today specifically we're going to be talking about the 1983 film version. I've tried so many things to lure this ghost out that it's worth a shot.
Hello. You have indeed piqued my interest. Here's what we'll do. Twilight Zone. The movie is an anthology film divided into 4 segments. For each segment you complete, I will give you one clue. I will reveal myself once you piece the clues together. Sincerely, the ghost. P.S. This isn't my real voice.
This isn't going to be easy, is it?
Rod Serling's seminal anthology series, The Twilight Zone, premiered on October 2nd, 1959. For these past 60 years, it's provided us with spooks, scares, and psychological benders, all wrapped up in glorious twist endings. The series has so many classic episodes that it's inevitable that someone would make a movie based on it, and that happened in 1983 with Warner Bros.' Twilight Zone the movie. In order to maintain the anthology nature of the series, the movie has 4 segments, each of which has a different director. Of course, the most obvious gripe about the movie is the fact that it's in color, as opposed to the series' trademark black and white. But honestly, I'm okay with this. The movie had a multitude of problems throughout production, more on that later, but ultimately it was released as a finished product. The movie's rated PG, even though the first segment contains some rather harsh language.
I don't really know if that's important for anything, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Anyway, without further ado, here's Twilight Zone, the movie.
The movie opens up with Dan Aykroyd and Albert Brooks driving down a road listening to a Creedence cassette. The cassette promptly commits suicide, which causes them to engage in the dreaded act of conversation. They eventually do a TV show theme song guessing game, which goes on for way too damn long before they finally start discussing the Twilight Zone.
Remember the one where the guy had the stopwatch? Somebody in a bar gave him a stopwatch, and he was this real obnoxious guy, and he took the stopwatch, and he hit it, and everybody else in time froze but him?
That's an Outer Limits.
No, that was a zone.
That's an Outer Limits.
That was a zone.
Eventually, Aykroyd asks Brooks if he wants to see something real scary. What is that scary thing? I think it's best to just watch for yourself. Anyway, that segues directly into the intro, which faithfully recreates the original. The narration is done by Burgess Meredith, who starred in several Twilight Zone episodes, most notably Time Enough at Last. You know, the episode that's referenced by everything. In fact, even the movie references it.
He loved to read, and there was a nuclear war, and he had no friends anyway, and he was down in the basement of the library. Yes, he was the last man. He broke his glasses.
Personally, I prefer Rod Serling's narrations, but Meredith does a good job.
A dimension of sound, a dimension of sight, a dimension of mind.
Too bad he only narrated. The camera doesn't dramatically swoosh over to him like it did to Serling, which is one of my favorite parts of the original series, but that didn't start happening until the second season of the show anyway. The first segment is the only one that isn't directly based on an episode of the original series, though it does borrow elements from the episode O Quality of Mercy. It stars a cranky old man played by the late Vic Morrow, more on why he's late later. Morrow's character, Bill Connor, is racist, sexist, and pretty much every other kind of prejudice you can think of.
Have you got a problem?
Yeah, I got a lot of problems.
He pretty much takes his frustrations out on the world and causes big scenes all the time. Once he's done drinking, he angrily walks out of the bar to find out he isn't outside the bar, but in Nazi-occupied France in the 1940s. Evidently, everyone thinks he's a Jew, and he gets into some real trouble because he doesn't have papers to show some SS officers. They get into a scuffle, he gets shot, and then he seeks refuge in some family's home. It turns out the family are Nazi sympathizers, and they quickly sell Connor out. He gets stuck on a ledge, and these 2 guys shoot at him a lot and miss every single time. Eventually, Connor loses his footing and falls into a KKK lynching in the Deep South. He tries to tell them that he's a white guy, but they see him as African American and prepare for him to be hanged. He breaks free, there's a minor chase sequence, and finds himself in Vietnam. He finds a giant snake and comes across some American soldiers who shoot at him, and when that doesn't kill him, they throw a grenade at him. The grenade blasts him back to World War II, where the Nazis actually land another hit on him. Connor is thrown onto a train headed for a concentration camp. He sees his friends exit the bar, but they can't see or hear him. Connor then rides off into the unknown, never to be seen again.
Yes, that's where it ends because this segment remains unfinished. Tragically, Vic Morrow died while filming this segment.
Originally, Connor was supposed to go back to Vietnam and redeem himself by saving 2 children from a helicopter crash. Tragically, the crash was not coordinated properly, and it killed both Morrow and the 2 child actors. A majority of the people involved with the accident were put on trial for manslaughter, but were ultimately acquitted. However, it still left a grim stain on all their careers, especially for director John Landis. Steven Spielberg refused to ever work with Landis again, saying, quote, "No movie is worth dying for." The second assistant director even took the infamous Alan Smithee credit. As a result of the accident, Warner Bros. Had to end the segment with Connor being taken away, which I think makes it much creepier.
Now we're going to move on to something much less dark in tone. Kick the Can.
While the episode Kick the Can is considered to be a Twilight Zone classic, I don't really think it's film-worthy. There are plenty of other episodes more deserving of film adaptations in my opinion. Anyway, the segment was directed by Steven Spielberg, and it has its traditional spark seen in movies like E.T. and Jurassic Park. We're introduced to Sunnyvale Rest Home, where middle-aged people dump their parents when they want them out of their lives. The inhabitants do typical old people things: watch Jeopardy, sleep a lot, and listen to people trying to sell them medicine. This guy doesn't even care, he's blowing bubbles. Be cool like him. We soon see our main character, Mr. Bloom, played by Scatman Crothers from The Shining. I know he's been in other things, but I've only seen him in The Shining. Bloom encourages everyone to talk about their past and the games they used to enjoy. One lady is particularly fond of the eponymous Kick the Can. This one guy, Conroy, is particularly curmudgeonly and asks why Bloom is going through all this trouble, and in response he says what's probably my favorite motivational quote.
The day we stop playing is the day we start getting old.
You heard him, folks. Never stop playing. He says that if they start playing again, they'll get the magic back in their spirits and they'll feel like children again. That night, everyone except Conroy goes out to play Kick the Can. Disclaimer: I have no idea how this game works. It seems like a hybrid of hide and seek and capture the flag, but that's not really important right now. Soon enough, everyone except Bloom actually does get younger, though they still talk like old people. It's kinda creepy, especially this kid.
Beware of the black pirates! Patty repents! Patty repents!
The kids have a lot of fun, but realize they don't want to be kids because even though being old sucks, so does being children. Bloom tells them that if they keep their minds young and fresh, they can feel like kids without actually doing it. They all become old again except for that creepy kid who goes off on his own adventures. The caretaker actually seems relieved to get him off her hands. The next morning, Conroy plays Kick the Can in a fruitless attempt to be young again. Bloom checks out of the home and checks into a new one in an attempt to share his magic with as many people as possible. Overall, this is a nice, heartwarming segment, but like I said before, I don't think it was film-worthy. The third segment is based on the classic episode It's a Good Life, and it's directed by Joe Dante. You can tell it's directed by Joe Dante because Dick Miller shows up less than 25 seconds in. In the conversation he has with the protagonist Helen Foley, played by Kathleen Quinlan, they mention Cliffordville and Willoughby, a reference to 2 episodes. Anyway, there's a kid who's sucking at Tempest, probably because he lacks the extreme reflexes required to succeed. Seriously, this is an endurance game. He starts banging on the machine and interrupts a boxing match, angering the other bar patrons, one of which is played by Bill Mumy, the actor from the original It's a Good Life episode.
Walter, the kid is screwing up the TV.
Hey, it's his quarter. The TV's free, you know.
Yeah, I got $20 on this.
Lots of luck.
One patron gets so upset he throws the kid to the ground. On the way out, Helen accidentally backs into the kid named Anthony, and she offers to drive him home.
Now here's the main difference between the original episode and the movie version. In the original, everyone is already used to being under his omnipotent control. But in the movie, we see it from the perspective of an outsider. And from the perspective of an outsider, his family seems like lunatics.
Speaking of the family, there's his completely uninteresting parents, his Uncle Walt played by Joe Dante regular and Twilight Zone alum Kevin McCarthy, and his sister Ethel played by Nancy Bart Simpson Cartwright. Which of course comes full circle when Bart Simpson parodied It's a Good Life in Treehouse of Horror 2.
Move over, I'm driving.
Oh, no can do, little buddy. See, there's a rule. Oh, wait, you're the little dude with all the gnarly powers.
In the tour of the house that even Tim Burton would find unnerving, we see Anthony's other sister, Sarah, who has her mouth removed in a legitimately creepy way. The family insists that Helen stay for dinner where they eat things that a child would want, peanut butter burgers, potato chips, candy apples, and ice cream. Earlier, Anthony told Helen it was his birthday, so she initially believes this meal was for a special occasion, but the family's reaction tips her off that something sinister is afoot. They then go to watch old cartoons, all Warner Bros, of course. I'm not mad. There's Feed the Kitty, which is one of my absolute favorites. Anthony insists Uncle Walt perform a magic trick with a rabbit. He reluctantly agrees, and to his surprise, he pulls out a normal rabbit. He does it again and pulls out this mutant freak bunny, which freaks Helen out. At this point, she realizes that Anthony is controlling everything and naturally attempts a beeline for the exit. Anthony discovers that Ethel left Helen a note saying he's a monster. She then reveals that none of them are really his family members and they all got there the same way she did. As punishment, Anthony does the sensible thing and puts her in the cartoon where she gets killed by monsters. Damn. The main issue with this segment, in my opinion, is that Anthony's evilness seems too forced. In the original episode, he was sinister, but still behaved like a little kid. Here, it's more like he's an actor reciting a script. He's not phoning it in, but he's not putting a whole lot of effort into it either. Anyway, he makes Taz appear from the TV, but he quickly turns into this ungodly abomination which is in desperate need of being put down. Eventually, Helen convinces Anthony he doesn't have to be evil, and he wishes the house and family away. She promises to teach him to use his powers for good, which he demonstrates with some flowers as they drive off. This segment was definitely better than the first two because it A, was legitimately scary, and B, changed enough to not make a cinematic rehashing of the original episode. I can get around the acting because after all, he's just a kid. Well, he was a kid. The final segment is based on Nightmare at 20,000 Feet and is directed by George Miller, most famous for the Mad Max movies. And Happy Feet. Hey, I'm not complaining, Happy Feet is freaking awesome. True story, it's the first full-length movie I saw in the theater. Anyway, the original episode is well remembered today not just because it's an amazing episode, but because it made William Shatner famous. In the movie, Shatner's character, renamed from Robert Wilson to John Valentine, is played by John Lithgow. We first see Valentine having a panic attack in an airplane restroom, and let's face it, we all know that's a perfectly reasonable place to be panicked. Now here's the biggest difference between the two versions. Shatner seemed to be schizophrenic. He had a previous history of panic attacks in airplanes, so people weren't surprised he acted the way he ultimately did. Lithgow, on the other hand, seems to be straight up afraid of flying, having severe anxiety attacks.
Lots of people are nervous about flying, but if you look at statistics, you're safer up here than on the ground.
That's right, safer than your own bathroom.
No, I'll be perfectly fine.
I thought that was a lie, but doing some research I found out it's actually true, since more people slip and or drown in their bathtubs than die in plane crashes. Huh. Valentine gets back to his seat and begins smoking a cigarette for about 10 seconds before this little girl puts him in his place, informing him that smoking ain't allowed. So you should be in the in-flight videos they show you before you take off.
You heard the captain. No smoking. N-O-S-M-O-K-I-N-G. No smoking.
Soon after, we get our first glimpse of the gremlin. Valentine freaks out that the gremlin's wrecking one of the plane's engines, but of course no one else sees it. The flight attendants offer him some anti-anxiety medicine, and he realizes how ridiculous his claim seems. They encourage him to just get some rest, but he can't because he hears noises outside. We then see the grand spectacle that is the movie gremlin. Compared to the TV gremlin, it's a million times scarier.
I thought I had an upgrade.
Naturally, Valentine freaks the hell out and demonstrates why I believe Lithgow's performance is better than Shatner's. Shatner's performance was mainly built on paranoia. He was less scared of the gremlin as he was of himself. Lithgow, on the other hand, is absolutely petrified of the gremlin and does an amazing job portraying it. The co-pilot gets Valentine to stop as he's threatening the safety of the other passengers. He says the engine's down because it was struck by lightning, not because a gremlin tampered with it. The turbulence gets extremely bad and the gremlin makes another appearance, taking out yet another engine. Valentine tries to take a Polaroid of it to prove it exists, but apparently forgot that glass is reflective. He then takes advantage of the plane's seemingly easily breakable windows. The passenger tries to stop him, but Valentine steals the man's gun and tries to shoot the gremlin. He misses, but the gremlin gets up close and personal with him and then makes its exit. He's put in a straitjacket upon landing, convinced he's a hero for saving the plane. Just like in the original episode, we see that Valentine wasn't insane because of the damage the gremlin left. The ambulance driver turns out to be none other than Dan Aykroyd. He calms Valentine down, but then pulls the same routine he did at the beginning.
The film then ends with Razzo's original opening narration, which I think is a good touch.
There is a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known to man. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone.
Well, the movie's not the greatest. The first few segments are okay, the first one might have been better if it was finished, while the last two are very well done. If anything, it's a nice reflection of the series. Some episodes are masterpieces like To Serve Man and The Masks, and others are The Bewitching Pool. The movie has great writing from recurring Twilight Zone scribe Richard Matheson. The practical effects are top-notch, most of the performances are really good, and it's got that classic Twilight Zone charm. That's not to say there aren't downsides. The first few segments are subpar, a couple of moments seem unnecessary, and none of the segments have that classic twist ending. The fourth one doesn't really qualify considering the gremlin is presented as real throughout the segment. But overall, I'd recommend Twilight Zone the movie, so you should go into it with a grain of salt.
Alright, now let's get down to business. The movie, the clues, the ghosts, it all comes back to the number 4. Tetra equals 4. All the games start with D. D is the fourth letter of the alphabet, 4D. Each face of a cube has 4 sides. Loki's first appearance was in Thor, the 4th film of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that film also introduced a famous cube. This is my 4th video this year. There have been 4 Twilight Zone TV series. This is Joe Dante's 4th credited film as director and John Landis' 4th as writer. Burgess Meredith was on the show 4 times, and his opening narration is from the 4th season. The number 4 is often synonymous with death, being portrayed that way many times throughout media throughout history, such as the 4 Horsemen, the 4 Ghosts in Pac-Man, and Ghost C in Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door, who was unable to leave the room where he died, room number 4, just like the ghost who's cursed to stay in this room. 4 add-ins, 4D plus Cube plus Loki plus Ghost who died here equals Tesseract. More importantly, this Tesseract. You found me. I'm impressed. I thought you'd be impressed by me killing you. That wasn't supposed to happen. But it allowed me to torment you every day. That is your punishment. For killing you, you were going to enslave the Earth. I prevented that. I should be rewarded. Whatever, this ends now. I agree. I thought ghosts were supposed to be intangible.
Where's the fun in that?
I've got a secret weapon and you'll never guess what it is. Is it a vacuum? Maybe. This is over. It's time for you to join me. Nah. Ugh.
You know this isn't over. It never will be.
And that means you'll never win. Well, I guess I could watch more Simpsons.